Hi everybody, welcome to my brand new show here on Ali Begg AB TV. This is Begg's Banter. The idea behind this programme is to exclusively interview not just players past and present from Aberdeen, but from the world of football in general. And to include folk from the world of show business as we combine chatting their love for football and their careers. Look out for brand new content coming very soon. We're going to get to Lee Richardson in just a moment, but first, big news coming out of the football club today. At last, Jim Goodwin has made his first summer signing. It's a huge welcome to Hilbert Ramadani. The midfielder has agreed terms on a 3-year deal with the club, and Hilbert becomes a Don following a successful governing body endorsement hearing. He arrives from Hungarian side MTK Budapest for an undisclosed fee. The manager is delighted. He has said he is a real team player who leads by example, and I've no doubt he will be a big favourite with the fans due to the desire and commitment he gives in every game. Can't wait to see what Hilbert can bring to the side. A very warm welcome to him. Right, at this stage, I think it's really important that I must acknowledge those who have been supporting me here on ABTV, the guys who sponsor me. First of all, Saltire Energy and Lux Scott. Mike Logie and Craig Cameron from Saltire have been with me from day one, and they continue to lead the way in the oil industry. And to Alan Findlater at Lux Scott, a jet-class luxury vehicle company who can also now be seen on Scottish television. There are their details. If you want to travel in style, get in touch. Thank you guys for supporting me, and thank you also for your continued support. Okay, let's get into it. This is why we're here. This is Begg's Banter. And I'm absolutely delighted to say that my first guest is cult hero Lee Rico Richardson, who signed for Aberdeen in September 1992. He came from Blackburn Rovers and made his debut just 3 days later against Partick Thistle, where he made an instant impact, setting up Brian Grant's opening goal within a minute of just coming onto the field of play. He played a total of 80 games for the club between September 92 and May 94, scoring 10 goals, before leaving to join Oldham in the summer of 1994. He is, and he will remain, a cult hero amongst the Red Army. Without further ado, let's introduce him. Hi mate, it's absolutely fantastic to see you. Thank you so much for coming on. And hey, mate, being the first guest on Begg's Banter. I hope that's going in your trophy cabinet.
Yeah, I'm honoured.
Good man. It's lovely to see you. Listen, let's get straight into it. So I want to take you right back to the beginning when there was the talk of you possibly coming to Aberdeen. Was there a defining moment that made you think, yes, I'm signing for Aberdeen?
I think it was when I took the trip up there. I didn't agree straight away. I flew up to Aberdeen from Manchester, and one of the things I do remember is driving in from the airport with I think I've mentioned this before. There was some graffiti on the wall, sort of English, some English anti-English slogans and things, which I thought was interesting. I'd obviously known about Aberdeen anyway as a club from growing up in the late 70s and seeing what had gone on in the European Cups and stuff. So in terms of signing for Aberdeen, it was probably a combination of going to the city, just getting a feel for the place and thinking, yeah, there was just a gut feeling that I could maybe make an impact.
When you first arrived in Aberdeen after you signed and you started to get settled, what were your first impressions of your new surroundings?
Yeah, it's quite strange. It's a really interesting city, as you know. It's obviously the granite city. That was something that was really striking straight away. Knew they had a university. And then kind of just from driving around in the cab, could sense that there was some nice places, like every place, not so nice places. But yeah, I'd known enough about the Grampian region and north East Scotland to know there was things to explore. And just as a club, Aberdeen, even in England at that time, had a good reputation. So it was and obviously had Duncan Shearer, who had gone up there 2 or 3 months before me, on the phone, sort of filling me in on things. So I had a good feel about the place before I sort of signed. And in my head, there was a 2-year contract in my head. That's all I wanted. And I'd been to, I had 2 or 3 years at Halifax, 2 years at Watford, 2 years at Blackburn, up to that stage. So I could get my head around, well, that'll go in a relatively quick time. So as long as I stay injury free and get stuck in, it won't seem too long till I'll be sort of having the next decision to make on my next step. So yeah, all those things were kind of all floating around in my head at the time.
You came from a very good Blackburn Rovers team. So when you first started training with your new teammates at Aberdeen, did you notice a difference in standards?
Probably more quantity at Blackburn, I would say. So we had essentially, 2 teams at least that could probably compete with each other, and then a few people wouldn't necessarily get on the pitch, in that sort of, if you have an 11v11 of the Blackburn squad at the time, it would be pretty strong and you could pick 2 teams that you would argue could be, i.e. the first team. I think at Aberdeen it was not quite the same quantity of good players. There was certainly still some quality. That was the only major difference I remember. That it was, and I noticed that there were, the likes of Ian Jess, obviously Big Alex, who I'd known about, Jim Bett, Paul Mason, Brian Grant. There was lots of good players, but maybe not quite as many as there were at Blackburn.
Okay, right. We're going to do a couple of sort of quick fire questions
Uh-huh.
at this part now. So, who impressed you the most in training?
It get really hard to remember, to be honest, but those guys I've just mentioned probably would be the first names on the list. So Paul Mason, Brian Grant as fellow midfield players, Jim Bett, obviously Ian Jess, who was a talented player, people like Gary Smith, even though he was a very laid back character, you could see he had some really good qualities. Stevie Wright. Those would probably be the ones that would just jump out into my head straight away.
Okay.
Big Mick Supatalainen, who was a bit like a, typical English type straight forward, stroke wide left kind of thing. But yeah, no, those were the guys who sort of probably stuck out straight away.
Who did you click with immediately?
It's probably Big Alex was probably one of the first to sort of reach out and sort of put the arm around the shoulder, for want of a better cliche. But to be honest, most of the lads, they were a good set of lads. There was nobody there who didn't really click with, I don't think. Paul Mason, fellow Englishman. Jim Beck, great character, great player. Really liked Jim. Brian Grant, really nice guy. There was some really nice guys amongst them. 1 or 2 characters. Robert Connor, I remember, was a bit of a card. Even Theo Tenkat, Dutch kind of madman. So yeah, there was nobody there who, as I've found in most of my career, I've always tended to try, be able to get on with most people. So, but the early doors, probably obviously Duncan Shearer, probably Paul Mason, Alex McLeish. So be the 3 who probably I gravitated towards the most through familiarity as much as anything.
All right, got some more quick fire for you in just a moment. But first, you signed in September. By that time, the lads had already played several games. So were you of the mindset that you expected to go straight into the team, or did you think you would have to bide your time?
I think from the conversations that I had with Duncan Shearer and the conversation I had with Willie Miller, there was definitely a sense that they wanted me to go and play. They didn't want me to become part of the squad. I don't think I necessarily had, if you like, in inverted commas, much to prove in terms of I knew they wanted me to get a run in the team as quickly as possible to see obviously how it went. So I was quietly confident, having seen sort of clips and sort of bits and pieces, that I could maybe offer something to the team. I knew of other players who'd gone up north and probably played against them in the past. So I had an idea of the standard that was, let's say probably 4 or 5 teams, good quality, probably is akin to top end Championship, lower end Premier League or First Division as it was then. Obviously ourselves, Celtic, Rangers, maybe Dundee United, maybe Hearts, I think. And then the rest of the division was probably less of that standard. So I knew of the sort of kind of tiering, if you like, in the league, which is the same in most leagues at the top end. So I was fairly confident that if I got a chance, I could get myself in the team.
How would you describe your style of play?
It's interesting because I think there's a lot of my generation of midfield players who would absolutely love to play now. To play nowadays would be an absolute doddle for us. And that sounds really blasé and maybe a bit big-headed to say, but in that era, most teams up in the 70s and 80s played 4-4-2 for the most part. We did get a 4-3-3, 3-5-2, came into play, certainly in the early 90s, late 80s maybe. But it was still predominantly 4-4-2, and that meant that you were in a 2v2 battle in the middle of the park with 2 opponents most of the time. And you had to do a bit of everything. You had to be able to get stuck in because the game was way more physical then than it is now. The game was probably as physical as rugby league is now in those days, and that's no joke. I mean, we were literally encouraged to essentially, be physical with our opposition before they got physical with you. So you had to be able to look after yourself. You had to try and get maybe, in and around the box to try and get a goal, and you also had to try and get on the ball, make tackles, get box to box, if you like. So I think a lot of us were pretty much all-rounders in that sense, is that we developed a bit of an all-round game. And I would say that's how I would say I was probably somebody who could do a bit of everything. Okay. would be what I would say.
You mentioned Brian Grant, Jim Bett, Ian Jess, these types of players, Robert Connor. Did when you came and you started training with them and playing with them regularly, did you learn anything from these lads?
Yeah, I will have done. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Jim Bett, for example, was very composed in possession. Didn't have much pace. I think he would be the first to admit, but was always able to make time. Brian Grant was, I thought, a very underrated player. But you moved the ball very quickly. Didn't dwell on it. Was a great player to play with for me. He literally just gave me the ball whenever I felt like I needed it or wanted it. Ian Jess was a delightful sort of player with great first touch and ability to twist and turn and cause defenders problems, hold the ball up, bright, clever. So yeah, there were good players. Paul Mason, a very good football player. There were lots of players in the squad who I will have learned from at the time. Can't remember specifics, but it'd be along the lines of certain attributes that they had. Probably shared a little bit myself, but it was definitely an environment where we had skillful players who I actually saw some of the footage from, I think it was the Hearts, one of the games, and we were a good footballing side. We moved the ball quickly, 1 touch and 2 touch, and I think we would have survived now definitely as a team. That the best team in that era, that 2 years I was there, we would have definitely held our own in any sort of standard, I would imagine.
Okay, a few more quick fire questions for you. Who was the joker in the dressing room?
There was a few. I mean, we'll probably all, there was Robert Connor was somebody who was always cracking on. Jim Bett, really dry sense of humour. Big Alex, obviously, character. They were all, we had I think there was a real good banter in that team. Even Big Brian Newby, we used to call him, Big Brian Irvin, lovely fella, polar opposite to myself, quite religious and all the rest of it. was I had the long hair and more like a devil worshipper. But we got on really well, you know what I mean? He was a really sweet fella. And there were, there was a few quiet lads, Stevie Wright, Gary Smith, that hardly said a word, the younger lads mainly. But no, most of the lads, mixed up Patalainen, what character he was, is. So there were loads. Paul Mason had a great sense of humour, so we all had a good banter. I couldn't single out anyone and say they were the funniest, but like Jim Beck was somebody I think who he used to make me laugh regularly on the way to training. He used to have these little sayings that his dry Scottish sense of humour that really used to make me smile.
Where was your favourite place to have a night out in Aberdeen?
This is almost impossible to answer. I mean, I remember the Howth. There's a little pub called the Howth.
Right.
Not saying that was my favourite, but I do remember that name. There was Drummond's, wasn't it? Drummond's. That was was a bar. I seem to remember Drummond's.
Yeah.
There was a few. I mean, the lads who I met was the band, the One God Universe lads. They used to, take me to different halls. It was the Ministry of, not often, but yeah, occasionally. It was the Ministry, wasn't it? That was a nightclub.
The Ministry.
Obviously, these were the days when we were sort of part-time professionals, not full-time 24/7 athletes that they are now. But yeah, those were the ones I can remember. What else would there be? Sure, maybe one or two of them have closed down now. Maybe, I don't know. But
there's a few.
Is the Howth still going? Is it the Howth?
I can't remember. Honestly, I have no idea. Absolutely no idea. I know the Ministry very well. Had one or two interesting nights in the Ministry.
Yeah.
Back
Definitely.
in the day, dancing on the little dance floor. Deary me. You mentioned about bands, and I confess I didn't know an overly a lot about this until I got speaking to some of your former teammates, that you actually played the drums. So did you play the drums in a band for the lads?
The only time I can remember playing, I may have done. The one time I can remember playing was at a wedding.
Oh, really?
So one of the lads, and I don't know whether that was one of the players, it might be one of the players had a wedding and there was a band on and I got on the drums. That might be it.
Okay.
I played on a record for the One God Universe. They recorded an album, and I guest drummed in one of the songs, Turkish Delight. I think I've got the album somewhere still. It's pretty good. I still think they're a decent band.
Cool.
So yeah, and I've drummed since 2009, and after leaving Chesterfield as a manager, I kind of joined a couple of guys locally here, and I've been playing pretty much ever since, up until lockdown. We haven't played since lockdown, but so yeah, my drumming career has gone from strength to strength.
Good man.
Ish.
Glad to hear it. It's like riding a bike, isn't it? I've been told.
Yeah, I do miss it actually. I haven't had a good smash on the old skins for a while, and it starts to make you twitchy.
Yeah, good man. Okay, you are now a sports psychologist. So if we can use your profession as a benchmark, why do you think we were unable to cross the line in the 2 cup finals against Rangers?
Long time ago, memories aren't always reliable. I think they had more experience of playing in those big games. And my recollection of playing against Rangers, one game in particular, they had a little bit of the, hard to say psychological edge, but just more of an experiential edge. We played them at Pretoria one night and we lost 1-0. And bearing in mind, they did have some exceptional players, Andy Gorham being one of them. I remember, and that's something I've seen recently, and it's, he makes several outstanding saves to prevent us from scoring a goal. That night, I would say, we pretty much hammered them, albeit not scored a goal. So they beat us 1-0 on that night. That was a night that if we'd have won that game, I think that would have put us within touching distance 2 or 3 points, with still, a dozen games to go. So we would have been right in the title hunt. I think in the one-off games, like I say, I just think they had a little bit more nous and experience, and probably a deeper a deeper level squad. I seem to remember, I might be wrong, Ian Durant came on as sub in one of those games. So that's a sign, they brought on players who could take it on again. But yeah, we put the one at Parkhead where I scored. I just felt that game, probably in particular, we probably weren't quite at our best, and whether that was because we weren't, some of us went over the top psychologically. In other words, we were too over aroused, as we say. I don't know. It might be a combination of that, and again, like I say, their more experience of dealing with those big games. They were probably on average an older team than us. I would think that's fair to say. And I think sometimes that counts, so they'd been there, done it, and we hadn't. And obviously, unfortunately, after that 2 years, then we started to break apart as a team.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about a happier moment. The games against Torino. Now, again, I appreciate it's a wee while ago, but I just want to sort of get into your mind. So when you received the ball at Pittodrie, and you've got the goal in front of you at the paddock end, and you just smash it, which is one of the greatest goals for me personally ever seen at Pittodrie. If you can cast your mind back, was it in your thoughts, I'm just going to hit this, despite it being on my left foot?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the really interesting thing is I didn't really smash it. It was a technique, and it's something that I learned a lot from, because subsequently I scored quite a lot of goals from the edge of the box. It's something I say to players all the time. Players tend to want to hit the ball too hard when they're striking a goal. You don't need to hit the ball hard at all, especially these days with these flyaway balls they've got. I mean, that's another change that's happened. Even in those days, those balls that that goal I scored with that ball, that was a step on from the balls that we started playing with when I first started playing. But all I remember was thinking when that ball was dropping on my left foot was, just get a good strike, just strike it nice, and don't try and overhit it. I didn't have all these thoughts, but something along the lines of, don't mess it up. Just get a good strike off to almost try and get an ooh from the crowd, rather than, I wasn't thinking, let's stick it in the top corner. So my left foot obviously wasn't the strongest. So I just concentrated on getting a good balanced strike, and, just got through the ball cleanly with my left foot on top of the foot. Tried to make sure I kept my head over it, and just focused on a nice, clean contact. That was all I wanted to focus on. Because what I didn't want to do was to miss. I've done that in the past, where you try and swing it so hard that you kick it and fall over. So that's what I was more concerned with, rather than scoring a goal. But obviously I hit it nice and true, and it literally just flew off, and put it in the top corner.
A few years ago, 3-4 years ago, when you very kindly asked me to put your goals reel together, and you sent me all the footage of all the goals that you scored during your career, and I confess, I was like, geez, I didn't realise Rico had this in his locker, because there were some belters in there. But I've got to be honest, none of them were better than that goal against Torino. Was it the best goal you ever scored?
I wouldn't say so, only because of some of the ones that I scored, the context and at the time. I think there were better aspects, but that's probably me from my own personal point of view. I can easily see how you might think that, because it was a good distance out, wasn't it? It was about, I must have been 30 yards out, maybe. Yeah. It was a half volley. It was on my left foot. Context of the game, it was I think that was the thing about that goal, was it was early in the game, and we knew we had to put them under pressure. And like I say, I didn't want to make a mess up, shall we say, and it'd be one of those things where all their players almost are laughing under their breath, thinking, "Come on, lads, we've not got much to play against here." I wanted to make the keeper work at least, So obviously, when it flew in the top corner, it was like, "Wow, that's there we go, game on." But yeah, and I think with that, the frustration for me was we let them. That was always a frustrating game for me, more so than the Rangers games. That was down to, I think, really some, we could have done better to not concede the goals that we conceded in that particular game. At Torino, they we went into a 2-0 lead. I remember that game because I was so ill before it.
Oh, really?
I shouldn't really have played, but I had some kind of bug
Okay.
And William was really keen for me to play. He wanted me to mark Carboni, the little player, the little striker,
Benito.
who was used to play sort of in the hole and all the rest of it. That was my job. And we got the 2-0 start, obviously. We were up 2-0 after 20 minutes. So then after that, they just absolutely marmalised us and ended up winning 3-2. But we were obviously still very much in the game. But the game at Pittodrie was really disappointing because we got that 1-0 start. And if we'd have just, got to half-time, started to get ourselves together. But they equalised within 5 or 10 minutes, I think, or certainly not too long. And I just felt those goals were really avoidable. So that could have been and that 1-0, if it was 1-0, we would have won the tie, obviously, on away goals.
Yeah.
And I think it was Arsenal in the next round. They ended up playing Arsenal in the next round. I'm not sure if that was the quarterfinals or the semi-finals, but it was, we were close to getting to a cup final potentially. So it was a frustrating one. So that maybe that's tarnished a little bit in my mind, the goal itself,
Okay, understandable. I have to be honest. When you left, it was like that sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach. I can still actually recall it, even all these years later. It was like you were there, you'd come in, you'd stamped your authority, you were making your mark, you'd sort of already started to grow this cult status, and then all of a sudden you were gone. And I think, I don't speak for any Aberdeen fan, but I think that we were all pretty much gutted. Why did you leave?
It was premeditated. I think that's the only answer I can give.
Okay.
It was mainly that. I had it in my mind that 2 years at Aberdeen should be enough to then get me a move to I'm not being funny, maybe one of the bigger teams in England, because I'd been when I was at Halifax as a kid, coming through. Kenny came to watch me. I think Sir Alex came to watch me as a young player coming through the leagues, if you like. So I knew I wasn't far away. I played with guys who ended up playing for England. So I was in the mix of a group of midfield players. So I would sort of, I'd compare myself to. So the Aberdeen venture, if you like, was look, let's go and play some games that show, what I can do, sort of thing, and see where it goes from there. Now, in some senses, it nearly came off. Oldham, I'd agreed to sign for Oldham in the March. And in the March, they were in the mid-table of the Premier League. And then they played in the semi-final of the Cup. I always remember this, against Man United. And Mark Hughes, they were winning 1-0 in injury time. Mark Hughes scores a volley that goes to extra time and then replay. And then Man United win the replay. And Oldham didn't win another game for the rest of the season. They were clear at that stage. They were comfortable in mid-table. They were looking like they were going to stay in the division. And I would then join them as a Premier League side. And who knows? Lots of people then at the time say I was the type of player that they needed at the time, blah, blah, blah. And maybe that would have been a match, a good match. And then I've had another year or two there. And who knows? That was the plan. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. They got relegated. However, I did make a mistake. I should have stayed at Aberdeen for at least one more year. That's something I've realised over the years. It was the wrong move to make, given what I'd achieved, obviously, at Aberdeen. But in my mind, because I kind of made a success of everywhere I went, so even Watford, I didn't do badly there. I was doing okay, but I played a bit of the homesick card because when I went to Watford, the manager changed. So what happens a lot of times in careers is the manager changes hands, situations change at the club, and that just changes the perspective a little bit when you're there. That's what happened at Watford, and why I went to Blackburn. When I went to Blackburn, things had gone well in a way. Like captained the team, got into the Premier League, but in my head, and at that time, it was, like I say, this idea of 25, 30 players all competing for a place in the team, that was unheard of until that time. That started. So in my mind, that was just, I didn't want to be there because I wanted to play football. Went to Aberdeen, backed myself, sort of do well there, did well there. So coming to Oldham, it was always going to be the same case. Well, and in my mind, it was, well, I'll just help them get back promoted back into the Premier League. It went personally well for me at Oldham, but as a club, that was the beginning of their demise down the leagues, and Joe Royal left within 2 or 3 months of me signing. So it was, you make decisions in your career, and obviously I can look back and probably question all of them, but the main one I know was the big mistake, was not saying, okay, had not really put much of a focus in Scottish football. The year I came back down, all of a sudden Sky T came up, and so the way, you know, things like the wages went up and all this stuff. So yeah, definitely made a mistake, but it was because it was premeditated in my mind that I wanted to do it that way, and so it was just part of the plan. Although the plan, because the plan changed slightly with the fact that I wasn't going back to a Premier League club, I should have changed my plan.
Okay. Right, we have got 5 minutes left on the clock. You got 3 quick fire questions to finish off, mate. So, did you ever receive the wrath of Willie Miller?
A little bit once, I seem to remember, yeah, but I think I did sort of go back at him a little bit. And he didn't really, I didn't experience his wrath a lot, I have to say, but he probably did on 1 or 2 occasions. And he was, you know, he was quite formidable. But he probably, I don't know, he reserved it for 1 or 2 others. I seem to remember he seemed to have certain people who he maybe wrathed at more than others.
Okay. Your most favourite game that you played for Aberdeen?
Ooh. Jeez, that's tough. I think I would have to, I mean, there's a couple that stand out. One would be that Rangers game where we absolutely battered them. That's when, in my mind, I knew we were as good as them. And that's what was frustrating then, to not win something, because I knew we had players. We could play a type of football that they couldn't, but we couldn't sustain it for long enough, and we couldn't quite get over the line, and some of their big players came to the fore. So that one would be one. And then probably the other one would be that Hearts game, we would think 6-2, and it was an end-to-end sort of game, and I think that's where we showed our sort of quality. Some of the goals we scored were really good team goals. So those 2 would stand out.
Okay. Sort of the same line of questioning, but to finish off, your most memorable moment during your time at Aberdeen?
Oh,
You've
wow,
got
that's
2 minutes. 2 minutes on
2
the
minutes, the
clock.
most memorable moment. Quite a few, you know, quite a few. I'd have to go with Torino, because I think it's the one now that links to a lot of people who were probably Aberdeen fans at the time. There's quite a few people who've seen it since. So probably have to say the Torino goal, because it's one that I'm probably remembered for them all.
Superb. Mate, absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Lee. It's fantastic talking to you, as it always is. So thank you, and the very best of luck, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Cheers, Ali.
There we are, Lee Rico Richardson. Fantastic. I'm sure you'll agree to see him looking and sounding so well. Guys, we are done for our debut show here on Begg's Banter. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, we've got plenty of content coming up very soon. Keep an eye on my social media sites over the coming days and weeks and months. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the chat with Lee today, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Take care.